Okay, so I'm going to be speaking today, and I want to take you guys on an exercise. We'll do an exercise with me. So I want you guys to imagine your first day of school. So for some of you, that might have been preschool. Others of you, it might have been kindergarten. Some of you, first grade. So I want you to think back to your days as a little child, and I want you to think back to some of the things you did, some of the activities you participated in. Like for me, when I was in kindergarten, I remember I loved coloring, and I loved nap time as well. And I still love nap time, but more so back then. But anyway, so I want you to think about some of those activities that you did. And so, does anybody have any activities that they did, like coloring, nap time, recess? What was your favorite part of the day?
Chocolate milk and graham crackers.
All right, okay, so chocolate milk and graham crackers. Okay, so now I want to fast forward us to present day, which is college student life. And as you can tell, our lives are drastically different than from when we were like in elementary. I'm lucky if I can have coffee in the morning, and then I do like 3 or 4 classes per day. Then I have lunch, and then I go to work for a couple hours, and then I come back here and I do homework for another couple hours, and then I go to sleep, and then it's repeat. So our lives are a lot more hectic and a lot more demanding than when we were kindergartners, first graders. And so I want to talk today about stress, because that all affects us, and it affects all of us, and so same with worry. So before we go any further, I think I'm going to define what stress is and what worry is. So stress is a feeling of feeling overwhelmed by certain situations, feeling like we don't have a good grasp on them, like we can't handle it. And worry is a feeling of anxiety and a feeling of overwhelming pressure. And so you're probably wondering why we're talking about this, but it affects our lives in so many different ways. For instance, homework is a big area of stress, especially for college students. Like for some of you right now, you might not even be really listening to my sermon. You may be thinking about the tests you have coming up, the homework that's piling up, the papers that you haven't written. Like, I'm thinking of the paper I haven't written, and that's causing stress for me right now. But anyways, I also think about financial situations. Like the economy right now is a big area of stress for lots of people, especially college students, you know, tuition and just worrying about how we're going to pay the bills, especially when we're college age. Some of the biggest purchases that we make are going to be like in our years from like 20s to 30s. Most of us will be like buying a car, buying a house, making big decisions. So that can cause a lot of stress. And I think about relationships. Some of you guys probably have a roommate right now, or you're living with somebody, whether that be like your husband, well, hopefully your husband or your wife, only your spouse, not with somebody else. But anyways, so that can cause stress. You know, you might have stress with your family, friends. Just whenever you have people, there's always the chance of having stress. And then I think about what's the big health concern right now?
Swine flu.
The swine, I know. So, like Northwest around here, we have hand sanitizers all over the place. Good example, we have the little clean up the desk kit over there. I was at Viola yesterday in California, and they're just as crazy as we are about the swine flu. You know, they have like the hand sanitizer things that we do. They have all these signs for like, get your flu shot here. So, I mean, it's not just here, it's like everywhere. And I think about the job situation. That's a big thing right now. A lot of us maybe in job situations where our boss is asking us to do a lot and we're feeling pressure from that. Or some of us may not be employed right now, and so we're feeling pressures from that. How are we going to meet our finances? You know, how are we going to pay for certain things without a job? So that's a concern for a lot of us. And lastly, I think about just globally, some of the things that we worry about, whether, you know, the big thing is environment. We're concerned about the world, global warming, all that kind of stuff, going green. We're concerned about, you know, all the money in the world, and we're concerned about like social issues like human trafficking, obviously, big issues like that. And we're just politics in general. So those are just some areas that I know that I'm sure that each of you can probably, you know, you're affected by one of these specific areas, and I know that I am as well. So I just wanted to talk about how the Bible, how it relates to this, because the people in Jesus' day, they also struggled with worry, they struggled with doubt, they had stress in their lives. So we're not alone in this. And so I wanted to turn to the Bible and have an example of how Jesus dealt with that. So I'm going to be referencing from a verse in Mark. It's a common story. Most of us probably know it. It's from Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 41. It's the story of Jesus calming the storm. And so I'll read that to you. It says, "That day when evening came, he said to the disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side.' Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up storm, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, 'Teacher, don't you care if we drown?' He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, 'Quiet, be still.' Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to the disciples, 'Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?' They were terrified and asked each other, 'Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him.'" And so I think about how stress is just a big issue in our lives, and I was looking up some statistics about this, and so the American Psychological Association and the American Institute of Stress, they had like a bunch of statistics that I thought were interesting, and they said that over 19 million Americans have stated that they feel stress and anxiety in their lives, and over 70% of people are unhappy in their job because of stress, and then 66%, this is what I thought was interesting, was 66% of people said that they would want help in like knowing how to cope with stress, how to deal with it. And so I'm going to take from the Bible passage like what we can learn from it, and how we can look to the Bible and look to God for how to deal with our stress issues and our worries and anxieties. So from the story of Jesus calming the storm, I learned that God is powerful and God is in control. It says that the waves and the sea obeyed him, while the waves and the wind obeyed him. And so we just see that those are powerful elements. And and then we look at God also saying in the other Gospels that how he takes care of like the small things, the lilies, And so you have that contrast of the huge things of life, and then we think of the small things of life, and that God cares for all of those things in our lives, that he cares about all of our needs, and he's in control. And I think about how in Israel's history, they fought a lot of battles, as we know. And a lot of times Israel, when they got defeated, it was because they tried to do it on their own. They tried to use their own strength, and they didn't look to God. They didn't trust him as being like powerful and in control. But when they did trust God and they relied on him for strength, and in their situations where they felt overwhelmed, they got victory. And so I think that that's an important thing for us to remember, is to remember who's in control, which is God, and to look to him because he's all powerful. And then another point is that God cares for us, and I kind of talked about that just with like God caring for the small things like the lilies and then things like that, but he cares for us. He said to the disciples, they were questioning, they were like, "God, we want you to save us because the boat's gonna capsize, we're gonna drown, don't you care for us?" And God said, "Be quiet, be still," to the storm. And he obviously cared about them. He didn't want anything to happen to them. And immediately it stopped. And then the disciples, trusted him. And then lastly, I think something that's really important for us, and something that I know gives me comfort in situations, is that God gives wisdom to us. I know when we're in stressful situations, how I was talking about the big situations of life that most of us will be making in the next couple of years, if we're not making them already right now, is, a lot of times we need wisdom in these circumstances. We don't really know how to deal with them. And I think it's important that we ask God for wisdom. And that's what it says in James. It says in James, verse 1 through 5, it says if anyone has a problem or anything, that they should come to God and ask him for wisdom, because he'll give it to us. And so I think that that's important for us to remember. And another thing that I thought was a good point is that God gives us peace. He said to the disciples, "Peace I leave to you, peace I give to you." And that's from John 14:27. And he was saying that after when he was about to ascend into heaven, and he was telling the disciples that he wasn't going to leave them alone and leave them alone to face life by themselves, to be worried or stressed out or anything like that, but he was going to send the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit's here for us.